Good morning, everyone. A few days late on this week's walk and talk, and I hope you're doing well wherever it is you are. If you're down south, congratulations on having far better weather than we're encountering up here. It's been absolutely awful this last few days, but hopefully we're getting towards the back end of it now. Like I said, a few days late on this particular video because, first of all, I don't know if anyone's noticed, England has arrived at the World Cup. Better late than never, some might say. And also, I've been doing a bit of a DIY mechanic project on my van, which, if anyone's done these kind of things before, will know that quite often you find a 2-hour job turns into a multi-week event where certain things don't quite go your way and you have to take the whole thing to pieces. And that's the space we're in now. And that's taken away from getting after this other kind of content, which I always really enjoy making. So, spoke about this a few weeks ago. In fact, it was probably a little bit longer, actually, and it was about the state pension. And it would appear that it's slowly starting to creep its way back into the news, or certainly elements and sectors of social media and the media, with respect to, do we have to move to a position where we are going to means test the state pension and essentially, like benefits or other allowances, tie the pension to income. And when you earn above a certain amount, you either qualify for only part of it or perhaps none of it at all. And I felt that it was important for me to come out and offer my own thoughts on that from an analytical, financial and an economical perspective, because I think, unfortunately, as is always the case, this is the kind of topic that promotes really strong opinion, usually from well-meaning places, but is typically quite misinformed. So, if we just rewind a few months, put out a piece, and I'll reissue that over the coming days about the mechanics and the functions of it as an actual product. So as a recap, essentially the pensions of today paid for by the national insurance contributions of those in the workplace today, and then whilst concurrently paying into that, you accumulate credits. The credits go into the credits go into a little pot against your name rather than the actual money itself, and then eventually you are rewarded the pension when you get to the right age relative to the credits that you've banked over the course of the working life. What you don't do is you don't invest in the traditional sense into a pot of money that belongs to you, like how you would for the conventional pensions. So what that means is that when you get to retirement age, the working people of the day are paying your pension. Now, the issues and the debates are stemming around this because, and we've discussed this before as well, by about 2034, roughly, that's always going to vary depending on a number of bigger picture things. The expectation is that the state pension in its current format becomes financially unviable, and you have to literally rewrite how you raise the money to fund it if you're going to sustain it. Now, interestingly, I got into a bit of a debate about this on X a few days ago, where unfortunately I think again the individual was coming from a well-meaning place but didn't really have a clue about finances and tax, and essentially said, well, you know, that's progressive tax. You put more in, you get less out. Let's keep taking national insurance contributions from people, basically, and if they don't get a state pension, well, to hell with it, never mind, because you're earning more and we should continue to give it to those that need it. And for me, this is where the fundamental misunderstanding really started, because my biggest argument here is that the state pension is not a benefit, guys, in the traditional sense, like how universal credit or other allowances are. For me, the state pension forms part of a social contract. So if you go back to when this originally started, you know, our parents, our grandparents, maybe even their parents, entered into that contract whereby you paid in to support people that needed it that day, and you paid the favour forward and society would pick the bill up later on for you. And for me, this isn't a benefit question, this is about a manifest question of fairness, whereby how can we have a social contract where you are asking people who are currently not of retirement age to pay to fund the pensions of people currently receiving them, and that's not their fault, by the way, either. You know, they've done their end of the deal, but to fund that, knowing that the rug is going to be pulled on them at some point in the future, and there's a very realistic likelihood, especially if you're my age or younger, that you're just never going to receive the pension that you've spent your working life paying into for everybody else. So for me, this is not a case. This is not a case of benefits. This is a case of fairness and allowing people to plan their retirement with a bit of autonomy and dignity. Now, the argument that this other individual was making, and I understand where they're coming from to a greater or lesser extent, is that, well, not everyone needs the state pension to live on, and maybe the wealthy, whoever the wealthy are in this particular case, shouldn't get it. And again, I understand the sentiment, but I think they perhaps missed the point, in the sense that, yes, I agree with them in the context of things like fuel allowances and other blanket benefits, like, hey, irrespective of your socio-economic position, here's some money because you're eligible to receive it out of the welfare system. I think we do have an argument there for those benefits to be reduced or cut. But this is not something that's the same. This is about an exchange, right? So it's, I am paying today, you will pay tomorrow. And inevitably, from a political perspective, whenever these caps are introduced, again, the aspiration is great, the intent is always honourable, but it is seldom delivered in a way that functionally delivers the result that we are looking for. So inevitably, what will happen if we were to means test the pension, if it's not a benefit, is essentially it'll get tied to income. Now, what that means is the individuals that miss out on this pension won't be people that have millions of relatively liquid assets in investment accounts. It won't be people that are beneficiaries of trustees. It won't be the super wealthy that are earning six-figure plus sums in retirement from whatever the pension arrangements they have. It will probably fall an impact on middle-class people, because that's just how our finance system is structured, right? So retired teachers, professionals, self-employed people of ordinary small businesses, they'll be the people that will feel this cut. And then you have to ask yourself, well, if that's the case, is that what we really intended? And is that fair? Many would argue not. Now, I always like to talk about the impact of human behaviour on finance and economic decisions. And I think this is a really interesting example of how, again, and I'm not even going to suggest that it's a policy of the government, because I don't think it is. I think this is that kind of background jungle drums, and eventually you put it on the agenda and we have a conversation, because let's be honest, the media runs the country in the UK, right? And the pressure goes louder and louder, and we have to have a conversation about the state pension. And inevitably we're going to have that conversation anyway, because we're going to run out of money. I've already said that. But when you think about how the tax system is structured and how you fund that pension, are you going to incentivise the proper behaviour that you hope to retain to keep funding it for the people that are going to receive it, knowing that I'm never going to receive it myself? What do I mean by that? Let's just assume for a moment that I'm a small business owner, and this really is the target audience here for what I'm about to say, because by virtue of how payroll works, not everyone else will be able to do this, and I'm not suggesting that this is something that people should do. This is not tax advice. This is a general observation about what people do when you try and hit them in their pocket. So let's say, for example, I own a small business, and because of how my company pay is structured, for me as a director, rather than take a salary, I might take dividends, for example, and rather than pay national insurance on payroll, I might make national insurance contributions retrospectively and buy credits. And I buy credits, knowing that I'm going to top myself up, because that will provide a bit of state wraparound for me as and when the day comes that I need it. But also it will continue to top up my state pension to the 35-ish years that you need in order to fund it, or to receive the full state pension. Question for you then. Guys, if I am a 30-something, 40-something year old self-employed person, And I have been told quite categorically that from X date in the future, the state pension is going to be a means-tested benefit rather than a pension in the sense that we recognise it today. Am I going to structure my affairs in such a way that allows me to continue to pay national insurance towards something that I have been categorically told by the people that provide it I am never going to receive because of my broader financial circumstances? I leave that with you, and it's not for me to second guess what people will and will not do, but I think there'll be a lot of accountants and tax lawyers out there having really meaningful conversations with their clientele to talk about the cost-benefit analysis of continuing to pay into a system that you're never going to receive out what you told you were going to get, and we've essentially changed the contract mid-term. And I think that's something that you have to think about on a broader perspective. When we discuss tax policy, any kind of finance policy, there's always a human behaviour element to it, guys. And I've said this before in a number of videos, and I'll say it again. Charlie Munger used to say this, and it served him well. And that was, show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. If you are not going to incentivise people to contribute and support a system, there's a very realistic possibility that they're going to find every way possible to retain that money for themselves, and therefore your job as the person providing that support just got a whole lot harder. This is not about beating the rich or paying things to people that don't need it. This is about me trying to offer a different perspective on what is a really, really important conversation. The state pension has been the backbone of our society since the early 20th century, and the state pension, relatively speaking, in the way that we recognise it today, has been around since roughly the end of the Second World War. It is something that has provided dignity to millions of Brits, many no longer with us, in their older age when they needed it most. And it was built on a system that made the assumption that the working base was going to sustain or grow to support the older people that were receiving that pension. That population demographic has changed. That's not a political point, that's a fact. We now have an increasing percentage of our population that is older, that is living longer, and therefore is requiring more support. We have a working age population that is disproportionately smaller than ones of previous years, and you've got a lot of people, my age and slightly younger, who for lots of reasons, finance being one of them, but not the only one, are choosing not to have children. Clearly then, there is about a 20-year time lag between child being born and entering workforce. And when we enter workforce, that's when we start to make contributions to things like national insurance. So we can forecast the trend that national insurance contributions in their current form are going to continue to trend downwards. We can also forecast, because we know, based on things like census data, that the demand on things like state pension is going to continue to increase. This is about finding a way that meets the requirements of the older generation so that they can continue to have the dignity that they absolutely deserve because they have done their bit and paid into that system when they get into retirement. But it's also about making this an equitable deal to the 30-somethings and 40-somethings who are just never going to receive that level of remuneration and support that previous generations did. And I guess my final point that I'll make is that begs the question of what can you do? For me, the biggest thing that you can do, if you're able to, is to take ownership of this problem yourself. I'm a big believer in, we don't stand and admire the problem, we find a way to get after it. And for you as an individual person, I'm talking about your own pension arrangements. So things like workplace pensions, if you are self-employed and you meet all the criteria, which, let's be honest, if you're working full-time in this country, you pretty much meet it by default, but go online, quick Google, you'll find it no time at all. You are eligible to be auto-enrolled into the into workplace pensions that your employer has to provide to you. That is essentially free money. Yes, you do have to take some money out of your salary to put it into the pension pot, but your employer also has to make a contribution as well. and all the money that comes out of your salary or your pay to go into that pension is added before tax. That means you don't pay any income tax on it, and therefore you can see the returns compound quite quickly when you pay in consistently over a period of time. The other things that you can think about doing, making sure that so first one, have I got pension arrangements in place through my workplace or a self-invested personal pension, a SIP? This is typically for people who are self-employed or who want an additional pension arrangement on top of whatever it is that they're being provided by their employer. You can go online, find lots of different providers, they're all very reputable, or most of them are anyway, and invest the money yourself into whatever pot you want that pension to be invested in. Same rules apply. You pay in during your working life, you get to 55, soon to be 58, and then you can access elements of that pension to fund your retirement. Other things you can think about doing then, investing, a really important one, and we're not very good at it in this country. And typical annual returns of the Standard & Poor's 500, the biggest 500 companies on the US stock exchange, which is an index, a collection of stocks, averages about 10% annual return a year. Stocks and shares ISAs, probably again one of the best wealth building products that are out there in any country, let alone Britain, allows you to invest £20,000 a year tax-free into any asset of your choice. No tax on the profits. Yes, there are going to be changes to the rules around holding cash in a tax ISA. I've got material out there about that already. Have a look. But if you're investing, it's not really something that's going to impact on you too much. But I think the message is this, guys. Go into it with knowledge. Go into it with open eyes. If you're a younger person, I'm not trying to scaremonger, but we have to face the reality that in the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to have to be some really difficult conversations had with people about the state pension. Trend analysis says, but hey, look, again, I'm trying to be apolitical and not a cynic here. Trend analysis says that if you're my generation, you typically don't fare very well in these negotiations, okay? So for me, this is about opening your eyes. It's about educating yourself about what options exist. And it's about doing everything that you possibly can to put yourself in the best position possible. Don't wait for someone else to come along and solve that problem for you, because typically they don't do as good a job with your interests at heart as you do. Very quick explainer, my own thoughts and analysis on that debate that's going on. Really interested to see how it develops. Keep an eye out for the articles and videos on Facebook, X, YouTube and Substack, where you can get more detailed, deeper analysis on some of the things that I'm looking at. And if you found this useful, please pass the channel on to people that might benefit from it as well. We talk about everything to do with personal finance, starting at the very basic products, how do they function, all the way through to big picture macroeconomic trends and human behaviour. Sometimes, guys, this isn't about being right with every single thing that you do. It's about finding ways to be wrong less. Because when you're wrong less, you typically don't make the expensive mistakes. For me, it's all about knowledge. And do everything that you possibly can to give yourself as much as possible and get a leg up in life. Hope you found that useful. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, have a great week, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. Bye-bye.